Hi everybody, it's Joe Cioffi on this Tuesday night. It's a couple of minutes after 7 o'clock on the 5th of March, 2018. Overall, it's a relatively quiet night across the U.S. There isn't really too much going on, but we do have some showers and thunderstorms that are running around this evening over parts of southern Pennsylvania and moving into southern New Jersey. But on the whole, though, it really isn't all that active across the U.S. So we'll take that as a bit of a positive here, and we'll take a look at what's going on specifically. Actually, a lot of the action is in southeastern Canada, off the coast of Nova Scotia, where you can see the clouds on the satellite loop here to my left. Concentrated in the in the upper right corner. The satellite loop is to the left that way, and right up there, right up at the top there, you can see where my finger is pointing. That is the low that developed off the Virginia coast yesterday, is now moving south of Nova Scotia, and there's another strong low that's north and west of Newfoundland at the moment. So there is quite a bit of activity going on over parts of southeastern Canada. They've basically had a late winter season to contend with there. But I want to bring up, let me see if I'm going to set up the upper air first, and then we'll go and do, let me just bring that paint box up here. Hang on one second. Okay, so we got that there. Bring this up. And okay, so here's the upper air view as of this evening. So this is the GFS's 6-hour forecast, which basically takes us an hour from now, and we can take a look at how this whole jet stream profile is, and it's one that is actually pretty impressive for the early part of June, where the bluish areas all signifying that we're seeing below average heights. So in other words, in the upper atmosphere at least, cooler than average profile across the eastern United States, and that's indicative of the trough that is in the east, and we'll show it to you here. And the thing is, this upper air disturbance that's sitting in eastern Canada, the upper low is centered in northern Maine. The trough is right along the east coast. So we're getting these upper air disturbances that are rotating along. And in the meantime, you've got a surface low that is sitting out south of Nova Scotia. And then you've got this thing up here, okay, which represents a rather intense storm that's basically northwest of Newfoundland. So it's a setup that in the wintertime we would be pretty cold and probably seeing some pretty interesting lake effect action out of it, or some snow shower action moving into the moving through the northeast. Meanwhile, in the west, you've got this cutoff in the Gulf of Alaska that's been sitting here, and the flow from the Pacific continues to move south of normal into California. You've got a ridge that is basically in the middle of the country. So, this whole area here is, other than some thunderstorms that occur from time to time with weather systems that cut through the ridge, is basically either dry or very dry. So, this is what we're starting with. And of course, holding this in place at the moment is this strong ridge near Iceland that's built over Greenland. So we do have that negative NAO, North Atlantic Oscillation signature, to start things off. Now, we're going to obviously see this change going forward, and that is going to be very interesting for us to see, where it takes us. I'm going to jump ahead, and we're going to go into next. I'm going to take a big jump forward into early next week, because we're going to see the pattern migrate to something that is also, rather impressive here in terms of its, amplitude and the cool air that will be in the Northeast and down into the Mid-Atlantic states. But you've got this double upper low structure on the GFS. This is again for next Monday now, all basically pinned out in the North Atlantic, higher than normal pressures across northeastern Canada. Let me do that in a bluish color, but you've got higher than average pressures all through here. So you still have this kind of NAO signature, and at the same time you still have this ridge. It's moved a little bit further to the east, but still basically as axised in the middle. And at this point too, you've got a rather deep upper low in southwestern Canada that extends down into the northern Rockies. There's probably going to be some snow in some of the elevated areas up in parts of the northern Rockies out of this early next week. So for this time of year, it's a fairly dynamic pattern to see. We've been used to getting these ridges to pop up in the eastern part of the United States from time to time anyway, but we're barely seeing that. So I think we're going to continue at least into the middle of the month with the notion that we will have the overall pattern is going to be one that is cooler than average, and intermixed with that is that, as we make these transitions from weather system to weather system, air mass to air mass, you'll get these brief warm-ups and these brief trips to warm and humid conditions, and then after that, it's back to the same old stuff. Now here's the radar. Because of this big upper air storm that's sitting to our north in northern New England, southeastern Canada, so you get these spokes, these bicycle spokes that rotate around, and as each one rotates around, you start to get some showers. And today, those showers actually did hit parts of Long Island and Connecticut. Nothing especially heavy, but there are some heavier downpours and some thunderstorms this evening across southern Pennsylvania. So, but you can see the motion, the counterclockwise motion here on the backside of this upper low is pretty much controlling the whole weather scenario. It's a very dry air mass at the surface, but it's very cold and very unstable aloft. The June sun, very, very strong, goes to work on it, heats it, and the instability, and you wind up getting these showers and thunderstorms that line up. Now, nothing is severe. There's no severe weather risk according to the Storm Prediction Center. They're just basically talking about some isolated to marginal risk of severe weather this evening in some of these cells that are moving through southern Pennsylvania. You do have a slight risk of severe weather across the Dakotas and two other smaller areas of marginal risk, one in western Oklahoma, West Texas, and the other one that's down in southeast Texas and along the Louisiana coast. So let's go and take a look at where we're headed with all of this in the coming days. And I'm just going to rearrange a few of these maps. Looks like I got two of the same here. So you know what? We don't need the paint box. So we'll put that up there. And we'll bring the GFS front and center. Now remember, what I just showed you with respect to the upper air from where we're going now to where we're going on Monday, and in the process we're going to see we're going to have things change, obviously, and in the east as that first trough pulls out, so you get high pressure to build in, and that should mean for some fairly decent weather here. Now tomorrow we have one more upper air disturbance to work through. It looks like it will be weak, so there might be a couple of brief showers in my neck of the woods. Also notice the GFS pretty bullish with maybe some severe weather tomorrow in parts of Nebraska and into Iowa, southwestern Iowa, northern Kansas, as low pressure comes out to the east from there. The east is dry, and then Friday we start to warm up a bit here in the east. Now, here's the thing for Saturday. You're going to have another one of these frontal boundaries dropping down from the north. There's high pressure that is starting to build down from northern Canada, and you can see those isobars kind of pushing in. So where that frontal boundary sets up will mean for some showers and thunderstorms. Now, whether they get in here before the Belmont Stakes, which is in the evening after 6 o'clock, I'm not sure what the exact post time is. It's usually around 6:30, but or not. That's a big question. But the threat is going to be there. It may be fast and firm when they start racing at 11 o'clock in the morning when the first race goes off at Belmont Park, but after that, when we get to the very late races 10, 11, and 12, you're going to have, anything that's after 4 o'clock, we're going to have to start really keeping a serious eye to the sky. By the way, look in the west. As that trough in the west starts to come in, you've got rain and even some snow being indicated by the GFS there. That shows you just how chilly that air mass is. And then here's the question for the Sunday: is that high going to build down and build further south and stronger, which is what the day run did today, by the way, and allow for drying to come down into the Northeast and the North and Mid-Atlantic states, or is it going to take longer for that to happen, in which case that frontal boundary will mean for some lingering rain or showers into Sunday before you finally get that cool push. And by the way, look at Monday now up in the Northern Rockies. You got snow up there, which is amazing. You know what? Why don't we pull up the snow map? That'll be interesting to see what it does. And yeah, look at that in the northwestern part of the U.S., up in parts of northern Iowa. Now, this is all going to be elevation driven, obviously, but indeed some fairly hefty amounts being indicated there. And also, by the way, you can see in parts of southeastern Labrador, you've got some snow being indicated there as well. So pretty interesting situation here. I'm going to jump to southeastern Canada, by the way, and we'll take a look. This is through Monday, and some late season snows, even some little patchy blues showing up over parts of Newfoundland. So why don't we look at the surface map? I'm going to bring this up a little higher so we can take a look, and I'll start from the beginning. I did see Wayne McDonald's message. I haven't seen Wayne in a while. He left a message about this, that they were talking this up, and this is the low now that is moving south of Nova Scotia. So there's probably some wind along the coast and along the south coast of Newfoundland. Look up to the east of Newfoundland, and you've got a deep low that's sitting between there and Greenland, and that's going to wind up, just kind of rotating up and out. This low clips Newfoundland, the second low from Nova Scotia, and moves away, and then you have a third weaker surface low after that as we go through, as we get into Friday and then into the weekend, where you just get a plain old weather front to go on by. But very unusual pattern, certainly, to say the least, with regards to what we're seeing going forward. Let me come back to the full U.S. so we can take you through what's happening for next week. And the East is going to be basically dominated the early part of next week by a big high in eastern Canada and a cool north-northeast flow, which hopefully won't have too much of a maritime influence to it, in which case it could be, fairly decent weather. The frontal boundary pushing south into the southeast, where we start to see some showers and thunderstorms there. And it looks like we could also wind up with perhaps a threat for some severe weather early next week across parts of the plains. But now, of course, we're getting deeper into time. The variability here becomes wider and wider. And we are still seeing the GFS attempting in the long range to do something with lower pressures in the northwestern Caribbean. So we kind of came into that day 9, day 10 time frame with this model on this tropical issue, but it still hasn't seemed to push it beyond that. So again, we're not going to take it very seriously until such time as we start to see the other models really get involved in all of this. I'm going to, okay, hold on. Let's see. Boy, I was able to scroll this down before. Why can't I do it now? That's weird. I wanted to get my full North America shot, and I can't. Oh, odd. Let me try one more time. Oh, Lord, I wanted to show you that full North America. Well, you know what? We'll take the North Atlantic then. We'll have to just settle for this. I like to show you what's on the West Coast, but for some reason now I can't seem to get that shot that I want. But here's the upper air. Starting from the beginning, there's your trough in the east. You still have, a pretty decent vortex up in northern Labrador there. It flattens out a bit as we go into the weekend, and then there's another upper air trough that drops down into eastern Canada. So that's responsible for the big high and the shot of cool air that comes into the east. Assuming that this is correct, you got a pretty wrapped up upper low near Nova Scotia by Tuesday. Ridge to the northwest of that. So, you know, this NAO is still rather somewhat negative. And you've got troughing out coming into the northern plains. Once that pulls out, there'll probably be a day or so where the ridge is going to try to build into the east. But, you know, I got to think that the mean trough position is wanting to stay in the eastern part of the United States. And you'll notice that it's still there, even though it may not necessarily be dynamic looking or cooler than average looking. We still have troughing. So in a pattern like this, the bottom line is that if you're looking for a heat wave, you're not going to get it. At best, what you might wind up with is a day or maybe two where temperatures are going to be very warm, and that would be about it. The rest of the time, you're going to wind up with what we're experiencing. I want to bring up the Pacific satellite view because it looks like we do have a tropical depression developing here, and I'll make it a little bigger. You can see it there in the lower right corner, just coming into view off the south coast of Mexico. The Hurricane Center, in its last discussion from earlier this afternoon, said there was a 100% chance of this developing, and it also indicated that it expected this to become a tropical depression either later today or tonight. I don't have the new discussion yet, so my guess is that they may wind up making this a tropical depression shortly. But if not now, then they'll do it in the overnight period. But this will be, you know, this probably stands a pretty good chance of becoming the Pacific's first tropical storm. The Atlantic is already ahead of the game, as we've already had Alberto. So that would pull us even. They've had already one other tropical depression in the Pacific back in May that didn't really amount to too much, and that was one that the models also indicated was going to develop into something. Oh, you know what? Why don't we look at the rainfall from WPC over the next 7 days? I think this is a pretty useful thing to look at. Some hefty amounts. There's the scale to the side. So when you start to see the purples, you're talking at least 1.5 inches. And then you get into the darker reds, you're talking 3-4 inches. So it looks like the upper Mississippi Valley and into the northern plains get hit with a fair amount of rain. Florida does okay, looks like 2 inches plus, but then this is spread over 7 days. And of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that every place gets the rain at the same time, since we're not looking at really an organized rain area or a tropical system that's going to be bringing heavy rains statewide to central and south to Florida, particularly central and south Florida. But it looks like sort of typical Gulf Coast action. And also up in the northwest, you've got some rains up from the coastal Oregon and Washington, and then on up northwest from there into southwestern Canada. So, you know, you look at this pattern, to me, I mean, we are in the early part of June. It really kind of looks like the end of April or the early to middle part of October. So for a long time, I guess we've kind of gotten conditioned into expecting, you know, warm weather to show up fairly quickly when we move toward the end of the spring season. But it doesn't seem to be the case. This is certainly not going to be the case this time around, the way things are showing up on the upper air. So, pick for the Belmont, Anthony Orr. Okay, so, look, there's a part of me, with Justify, you know, there's two arguments in how you could look at the Preakness. You could say that he might have regressed a little bit. I think you could make the argument that he may have regressed. You could make the argument that if the race were another 1/16 of a mile, those horses that were closing would have caught him and passed him, but that was not the race that happened. The race that happened was the race that happened. I also think you could look at it and say that the track there with 7 inches of rain that it endured over several days I mean, it must have been so incredibly deep in terms of the slop that it would take a toll on any horse trying to do it from wire to wire, even the best of mudders. So I kind of looked at it as a more impressive performance rather than one that maybe opened up a vulnerability, or at least creates the idea of a vulnerability in this horse. So the question for the Belmont becomes the 1.5 miles. Can he get the 1.5 miles? And I think he would probably need to get on the lead and run 25-second quarter miles, and be not have complete control of the pace, and that the pace would be very slow and relatively reasonable going through the first 6 furlongs. And if he can get out on the lead and do that, he may be he may be tough to catch. The other question, I think, is going to be the fact that if the Belmont is run on an off track, this would be the first time that all 3 races would have been run on off tracks. By off track, I mean either not a fast track, either muddy or sloppy. So if he gets slopped for the 3rd time in a row, you kind of, I guess, have to favor the fact that he, won on the slop twice already. I've heard a few people say that if he wins the Triple Crown on a muddy or sloppy track, that he should get an asterisk next to his name because of the fact that he won it on sloppy tracks. My response to that is simple. So did the other horses that ran against him. Okay, so that to me is if he wins the race under whatever conditions the race is in, he does not get an asterisk next to his name, in my opinion. Carl White's, it's not uncommon to have snow in early June in Labrador. No, I wouldn't think it would be, Carl, but I'm just saying that it seems as if the frequency of these events over the last couple of weeks, because Gander, I saw, had about 18 inches at one point spread out over last week, so it does seem to be a bit much in terms of the activity. It's more also along the lines of the fact that the pattern that is causing that is actually causing things to be rather cool here in the Northeast and down into the northern mid-Atlantic states. So it's keeping our pattern here in the East a lot cooler than it otherwise would be if we were if we had a ridge position in the East, in the eastern part of the United States. Just running through everybody's thoughts. Oh, David Schwartz is going to the hopefully the 16th is nice for the Dead and Company concert at City Field. All right, well, you got another week or so to wait for that. Well, actually about 11 days. So remind me, and we'll see what happens. Although if it's a Dead concert, does the weather really matter? I mean, are you going to pay that much attention to it? What did one Deadhead say to the other Deadhead when they ran out of weed? Hey, this band sucks. Very good, Carl Weitz. I like that. Exactly. Well, that's my point. Are they really going to care if they're out there in the pouring rain or not? Okay, let's... it's trying to get everybody's... yeah, the electric bills are doing quite well with this pattern. And also the pools. You don't have to be running your pool. You got to run your pool heater if you want to use it. But you could probably just run the filter for a minimal amount of time. So he drew the post 1. Oh boy, Anthony Orr. Ryan Ford, could the troughing pattern be more conducive for tropical systems wanting to come up the East Coast if the troughs are positioned in the right area or the wrong area, depending on your perspective? Well, the persistent trough in the East, it would have to be positioned somewhere north-south from the Great Lakes down into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. Well, I would just say that, if you're seeing the pattern where you're getting troughs in the East in general, that raises an eyebrow. The question is the orientation of that trough. Is there going to be some blocking around, which would force a more southerly flow along the East Coast, given the right scenario? Though that's another story, and that's that is highly speculative. So with what we have now, if that were to continue with the westerlies as far south as they are, you would not be able to bring storms up the coast. They would be forced out and recurve to the north and east. So you would have to have something that causes the trough in the east to be west of the coast, maybe along or just west of the Appalachians, for example. Johnny Quest made it down to the 40s last night, and 40s for a few nights. Yeah, that's nice. You know, I'm enjoying it, especially given the fact that I'm trying to still get over this head cold. And by the way, I am feeling better tonight. I don't like to take stuff when I'm sick. I'm just not good at doing that. But I did finally give up tonight, and I took a decongestant because I've got a little bit of congestion in my chest. And excuse me, I'm glad I did, because I'm actually feeling a lot better tonight and sounding better. So hopefully in another day or two I will be 100%. But I'm definitely better than I was over the weekend. By the way, I will be at another library this weekend at the North Babylon Library on Long Island on Saturday, and I will be in much better physical shape. So I will live stream it, and I will definitely be more on the ball and organized. I had a really tough time just physically. My brain was so clogged up with congestion that I couldn't even think straight. So you know, I was not happy with what I did. So I will definitely, you know, it'll be a much better one coming up on Saturday. So I will attempt to live stream it also. Not allergies. I can tell you right now, with the way I'm feeling, I don't have allergy problems at all. So I know it definitely isn't allergies. This was definitely a very, very tough cold, and there's a lot of people that I know that have it. So it's not a surprise that you know, I picked it up. Nicole Sweet, there's nothing out there. By the way, in the tropical Atlantic, one of the things that I noticed, and I pointed this out on Saturday. Let me see if I can bring up the map here, folks. So just give me a little room. I'm going to attempt to do this on the fly, so just bear with me. So I'm going to bring the paint box back up, and we'll bring it up front and center. All right, so just hang on for 1 second here, and I got to do a bit of a Google search. Sea surface temperature anomalies Atlantic. Okay. So let's see if this works. So we'll go to, yeah, I think this is going to be good. So hang on 1 second. I'm going to put up here, this is the sea surface temperature map anomaly. So in other words, below and above normal. And let me make sure that you're seeing what I'm seeing, which you are. So that's a good thing. This is something that I think we're going to have to watch and pay attention to. This is a little bit different than what we've had in prior seasons going into the hurricane season. We've been getting kind of used to having large areas of above average, or at least near average or slightly above average water temperatures. It's different this year. We have, in fact, I'm going to outline it in red, but this whole area in the subtropical Atlantic to the southeast coast of Florida, and then down into the tropical Atlantic, also even into the northwest Caribbean and into the eastern Gulf. This is actually a fairly large area of below average ocean water temperatures. Also, you know, the climatological area where you're going to usually see development is in the northwest Caribbean and southeastern Gulf of Mexico this time of year. We just saw Alberto coming out of there. Also below average water temperatures. You wonder whether that might have played a little bit of a role in perhaps keeping this more subtropical, keeping Alberto more subtropical than than tropical. But that below average temperature profile, and I'm going to bring up the full Atlantic because I think that might help. let's see, did this image work? No, sadly this image does not work. Eastern Hemisphere, full global. Let's see if that's good. Okay, actually this might help considerably. So let me try this image now and see if we can. Yes, all right, that's excellent. So take a look. I want you to look up near Greenland and south of Greenland here. Okay, you guys, yeah, you're seeing the map, so that's a good thing. So I can show you this, but you know, one of the things we've been talking about, the fact that there's been a collapse in the Gulf Stream, and I want to bring up the actual map of actual temperatures. We'll be able to see it. We're just looking at the anomalies here, but it's very interesting. If you look at this, you've got all of the waters south of Greenland. Now, there's been a decrease in the salinity of the waters in this area. You've got all of this area here below average, and it looks like, you know, the way the currents in the Atlantic work, that colder water is somehow getting drawn southward along the west coast of Europe down to off the African coast, and in fact, you know, here's the equator right here, okay, and this is 20 degrees north. So this is, you know, in this section here, this is where your Cape Verde storms are going to form when you get into August. You know, you got to wonder if that area of below average water temperatures persists going into the peak hurricane months. It may impact tropical storm development out in the tropical Atlantic. You could make an argument that this would mean for fewer storms. By the way, if you look at the Pacific in terms of the El Nino or La Nina, you have water temperatures that really are, you know, either a little bit below normal or a little bit above normal or right near normal throughout much of the equatorial tropical Pacific. So at least from that standpoint, you have a ENSO neutral, Nino, La Nina neutral pattern. So you certainly could argue that this should at least be a year where the hurricane activity might be a bit closer to average if we just looked at the water temperature profile. I'm going to see if I can find, let me see if I can find the actual, these are anomalies. So let's see, I'll get the, just the regular sea surface temperatures for the Atlantic. And see if I can come up with, yes, so we'll try that. And Bering Strait, North Atlantic. All right. I'm trying to get a good map for you here. Where is it? I mean, here's my area just to show you the Northeast. Here's the view of the Northeast, the actual ocean water temperatures, which are below average, but in terms of the actual temperatures themselves, we're looking at on the scale here. So the light blue water temperatures in the middle 50s. So you have to really go. You can see the Gulf Stream coming out off of North Carolina. You can see the Gulf Stream coming off the North Carolina coast, kind of turns, you know, east like it likes to do, out into the Atlantic, then, you know, starts to weaken as we get toward 60 degrees west. I'm going to have to pull up the other map now to go out a bit further. Unfortunately, on this site, it doesn't go out as far into the Atlantic as I would like it to. So we'll use the wider view. Hello. Let's see. Is this going to be enough? Oh, okay. Now, I don't know if there's okay, here we go. So if you look on this map, on the actual water temperatures here, the Gulf Stream just basically disappears. It's really interesting that we have this situation here, and what is that going to mean when we get deeper into hurricane season, and maybe when we get into the fall and we start looking ahead to the winter? I mean, how this is going to have, this may have some impact in ways that I'm not sure what the impact is going to be, but certainly it is a player. There have been a number of things written about this. If you Google it, I'm sure you can find some. You'll certainly find some news stories on it that are not too technical, unless you're into the technical stuff, and then you can take a look at those. I'm going to start looking around and reading some of this stuff when I have a little bit of time, because I'm going to be really, it's really piquing my interest here in terms of, what's this going to mean going forward. In fact, tonight on Facebook, when we do the Joe and Joe show, I'm going to leave this map up here because I want to show Joe and get his thoughts on what that might mean. And that's at 9 o'clock Eastern time tonight. Weather for the U.S. Open on Father's Day, William Huber. Give me some time, Bill. It's the 5th of June, so we've got some time yet before Father's Day weekend. I don't know if by then, maybe we'll be into something a little bit more normal, but that troughing in the east is something that seems to be very persistent. Johnny Quest, are the volcanic eruptions around the world affecting the weather? Not yet, but the Guatemala eruption, Joe and I talked about this last night. The Guatemala eruption is something we might want to pay attention to. If that really continues to be very, very active, if that ash gets up into the upper atmosphere, up into the stratosphere, then maybe it'll have some impact. Right now, we're kind of like in watch and see mode to wait and see where this goes, since the eruption just happened a couple of days ago. And Israel, last night we were talking about just this. So tonight I got that map, the water temperature maps. I'm gonna, Joe and I'll be curious to see what his opinion is on this. And that's at 9:15 again on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Cioffi, or on Joe's Facebook page, Joe Rayo Weather. All right, folks. Thanks very much for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. Just a quick mention of the fact that there's an Amazon link on the description of this video, and also if you access this video later on the video library, I'm a participant in the Amazon Services Associates program. It's an affiliate advertising program. It is designed a way for channels like me to earn some fees from Amazon. If you shop on Amazon and you buy something using the link, if you connect to Amazon through the link, Amazon throws me back a little bit of coin, and everybody's happy. You get your stuff, and I get a little bit of support for the channel. Get to buy myself a cigar or a cup of coffee, and everybody's happy. Thank you for those of you who have used it or have gone and done searches on there. I really appreciate it. All right, so let's leave it at that. We will see you tomorrow. 7 o'clock seems to work for me right now. The only thing is I might want to run out and grab some dinner. Actually, my mom lives very close to here, and usually I was doing the 6 o'clock live streams because then I would go out at 7 o'clock to go grab some dinner at my mother's house, but I might be able to still do that if I do the live stream at 7 and we finish it up by 7:30, and then I can run out. So, a little bit of my own issue. That's kind of why, that's one of the many reasons why I juggle the time sometimes, because it's either that or sometimes other things are going on, breaking news or breaking weather, and I got to take care of that before I can come on the live stream, so I got to move things around. So I hope you'll understand that, and I appreciate your indulgence for when I move around the start times on the videos. Have a great evening, everybody. We will see you tomorrow.